Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm so happy you're here. So today's video is going to be another pattern tutorial. I mentioned this in my last video, but I live in Florida and it is so hot. So obviously I've been focusing a lot of my energy on making summer knitwear. If you follow me on my Instagram, you can confirm that this is true. It's just been every day making tank tops, crop tops, anything that will prevent me from melting as soon as I step outside. So this is one of the pieces that I've made recently. It has this beautiful sweetheart neckline thanks to the ruche. It also has a nice little drop stitch detail. So if you have one of those cute little underboob tattoos, this might be the top for you. It also has more of like a mesh texture on this bottom part, and I made it that way to increase the breathability of the piece. I also added these beads that I think are so cute. I feel like any top with beads reads as very summery to me. You can let me know if you agree with that or not. But I really want to show you today how to make this top. So before we get started, of course, we have to talk about materials. For this project, you are going to need at least 200 yards of medium weight yarn. I'm in between a size small and a medium, and I used about 200 yards. If you're ever not sure of how much yarn you need for a project, always opt for getting more than what you think you need. It sucks to run out of yarn halfway through a project, and it's even worse to run out of yarn right at the end of one. Plus, there are tons of fun scrap projects that you can make to use up that leftover yarn. And I will for sure be talking about scrap projects another day. You are also going to need 5mm circular needles for knitting up this top section. And you're also going to need 10mm circular knitting needles. You are also going to need 10mm knitting needles for this bottom section. For the straps, we are going to use a 5mm crochet hook. And then if you want to get fancy and add the bead details, I use these wooden beads from Michaels. They have a super wide opening so that I could fit the crochet chain through. So any beads that you have that have a wide enough hole to fit a crochet chain will work. You're also going to need to take some measurements before getting started. The first measurement that you need is the width around the widest part of your bust. You're also going to need to take a measurement over your boob like this to figure out how long you need to make that top section. And then the last measurement that you have to take is from under your boob to the part of your torso where you want the top to end. The last thing that you need to do before you start knitting is figure out how many stitches to cast on. I covered this in a lot more depth in my beginner knit bralette tutorial, but we're just going to do a speed run version of this today. First, using your yarn of choice and your 5mm needles, you're going to knit a 12 stitch by 12 row swatch. When you're done knitting up your swatch, you are going to stretch it from the middle and then take the measurement of your stretched swatch. Then to figure out your number of cast on stitches, you are just going to insert your own measurements into this equation. You are going to take the measurement of the width around your bust, divide it by the width of your stretched swatch, and then you're going to multiply that number by 12 because that's how many stitches were in the swatch. When you have your answer, round to the nearest even number because that's going to be important later. Once you have that number, you're ready to cast on. You're going to cast on however many stitches you calculated plus 1 because we're going to use that extra stitch to join in the round. Also, I'm super mad because when I started filming this yesterday, I was having a really good hair day. And today my hair just said, absolutely not. We are going to be dry. We are going to be poofy. So I'm getting started with my cast on now. I have my 5mm needles. This is the yarn that I'm going to be working with today. It's Malabrigo Rios. We already know I'm using Malabrigo Rios for everything. I'm just going to eyeball measure my tail for the long tail cast on. And I'll see you back when you're ready to join in the round. When you're done casting on your stitches, it's time to join in the round. Oh, I have makeup stains on my hand. 1 second. First, you're going to check to make sure that all of your stitches are facing the same direction. It should look like this. If your stitches got twisted like this, you're going to want to make sure to fix that before you join in the round. So starting with your tail and your working yarn on the right side, you're going to pick up this very last stitch on your left needle, and then you're going to insert your left needle into this first stitch on the right, pull it over the other stitch, and then drop it off your needle. All you have to do to close this loop here is pull on your tail and your working yarn nice and tight. And there you go. Now that you've joined in the round, all you're going to do is knit until you reach the measurement that you took going over your boob, plus about 1.5 inches to account for the stretch. So go sit somewhere comfy, put on your favorite TV show. I'm currently rewatching Bridgerton while I wait for part 2 of season 3 to come out. I'm so excited. And I'll see you when you're ready to move on to the next section. Okay, welcome back. It's now time to move on to the next section of the piece. And for this section, you are going to need your 10mm needles. Essentially what we're going to be doing is transferring all of our stitches off the 5mm needles onto the 10mm needles. We're also going to be cutting our number of stitches in half by knitting 2 together all the way around. To get started, you're going to insert your 10mm hook through the front of the first 2 stitches on your left needle, grab your working yarn, and pull it through. You're going to do the same thing for the next 2 stitches. Insert your needle through the front of both stitches and knit together. You are going to keep knitting 2 together until all of your stitches are transferred onto the 10mm needles. So once all of your stitches are transferred onto your new needle set, we're actually going to add 2 additional stitches. All you're going to do is take your working yarn, hold it like this, grab the yarn from your thumb over the yarn from your index finger, and pull through. Sort of like a pseudo long tail cast on. These 2 extra stitches are going to be dropped when we get ready to cast off, and it's going to create that gap in the middle of the piece. Similar to the first section, all you're going to do is keep knitting in the round until you reach the length from under your boob to where you want the end of your piece to be, plus 2 inches. These 2 extra inches are, again, to account for the stretch of the piece, as well as for the curling that's going to happen after we cast off. Once again, I'll see you back when you're getting ready to cast off. Okay, this is my piece so far. I'm just about ready to cast off, but before we do that, we need to drop those 2 extra stitches. I'm getting ready to drop my stitches now, and first I want to make sure that I'm dropping the right ones. I'm just going to follow this column all the way down and make sure that this is the extra stitch that I added. So here's the first one, and then the stitch right after it is also another added stitch. So once I know I'm working with the right stitches, I'm just going to pull them both off of my needles like this. After I drop those 2 stitches, I'm actually going to add the 2 stitches back, because when we do the cast off, we want to make sure that this middle gap section stays nice and wide. We don't want it to come to a really tight point at the end. So I'm just going to knit 1 more row in the round, and then I'll be ready to cast off. For the cast off, I'm going to be using Jenny's Stretchy Bind Off. All I'm going to do is knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, and then I'm going to insert my left needle through these 2 stitches and pull it over the last stitch on the needle. And then again, yarn over, knit 1, insert the left needle through these 2 stitches, pull over, and drop it off of your needle. When you get to the end of the cast off in the round, you might notice that there's a big gap between the start of the cast off and the end of your cast off. To close this gap, all I do is I insert my right needle through this V shape formed by the first stitch in the cast off. I'm going to pull my working yarn through that V shape, then pull that again through the last loop on my needle, and then I'm just going to cut a tail. Here's the piece fully off the needles. As you can see, I already pulled the drop stitches all the way up. You want to make sure that you pull them all the way up to the point where you added the stitches originally. It looks a little bit funny when it's not being worn, but I promise you, as soon as you put this on, it's going to look super flattering. We only have a couple steps until the piece is fully finished. And first we're going to use our yarn needle to create that middle scrunchy part. So I have my top with the drop stitch section right in the middle. I'm going to be working the ruche using these two columns, this one and this one. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take my yarn needle with some yarn, and I'm going to insert it through the back of one of these stitches, and then I'm just going to go up the column, working over and under all of the stitches in the column. Okay. I'm then going to pull my yarn through, and then I'm going to do the same exact thing working down this column here. So I'm just going to insert my needle, and then again, work over and under all of the stitches. Okay, so now that I've worked my under over, I'm just going to cut my working yarn so that I have two tails. And then all I'm going to do is just pull on my two tails to create a scrunch. I like to go back in with my hands and just make it a little bit more even. And then to make sure that it stays tight, I'm just going to tie a double knot. And now we have a nice little scrunch. Now it's time to add straps. I've just tried the piece on, and I used a stitch marker to mark where I wanted my strap to go. I also counted out that there were 16 stitches between the center and the stitch marker. So I'm going to count out the same number of stitches on the other side. And then using my 5mm crochet hook, I'm going to crochet a 100 stitch chain into both of my marked places. To add the back straps, I'm just going to center my piece as much as possible, and then just eyeball on the back where I'd like my straps to go. I'm doing the same exact thing for the other straps as well. I'm just crocheting a 100 stitch chain. Besides weaving in our ends, the only thing left that we have to do is add our beads. You are going to need 8 beads because we're going to be using 2 for each strap. These are the wood beads that I mentioned that I got at Michael's, and you can see that the hole is pretty wide, definitely wide enough for the strap to fit through. I'm just going to take one of my straps, pull the tail through my yarn needle, and then put my yarn needle through the bead, and just pull it all the way down to the base of the strap. I'm then going to tie a knot to go right above the bead to prevent it from slipping upwards. I'm then going to take my second bead and string it through. And then I'm going to triple knot the end of the chain just to make sure that the bead doesn't slip off. And you can always test as you're making the knots. You can test to see if your bead is at risk of slipping. And then I'm going to add a couple of knots on the other side of the bead just to make sure that it stays nice and secure in this spot. You can see the knots on both sides. It just sort of locks it in place. Once you're finished with one strap, you're going to do the same thing to the rest of the straps. And then once you've sewn in all of your ends, your piece is ready to wear. So I'm wearing the finished piece. It turned out amazing. I really hope you enjoyed watching today's video and following along with the tutorial. I had so much fun remaking this top for this video. Be sure to tag me on Instagram if you end up making this top. I'll leave my socials here. Be sure to subscribe if you want to see more knitting related content. I post new videos every Friday. Leave a comment if there's another one of my designs that you'd like to see a tutorial for. Like this video if you learned something new, and I'll see you next time. I love you. Bye!